After months of backing Donald Trump online and on the campaign trail, Elon Musk is set to play a key role in the incoming administration. But is his transformation from tech CEO to policymaker just the latest sign of the growing political power that major tech corporations and their leaders wield over our society? On this week's UpFront, I'll ask that question to two of the world's leading thinkers on the influence of tech on democracy. Joining me to discuss the power of big tech and its future under a second Trump administration are Yanis Varoufakis, economist, author, and former Greek finance minister, and Maria Ressa, Nobel Peace Prize laureate and co-founder of the Filipino news site Rappler. Thank you both for joining me. Yanis, I'm going to start with you. It's nothing new that the wealthiest Americans and corporations play an outsized role in U.S. politics, and this election is no different. Both campaigns were bankrolled by billionaires. But in the last decade, the tech industry has been growing in its power and its influence over politics. I mean, Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla and Twitter and SpaceX, was Trump's most high-profile campaigner. The CEOs of Meta, Apple, and Google had direct conversations with Trump during his campaign, and they were among the first people to congratulate him over his victory. Now, in your book, Technofeudalism, you argue that we're living in a new economic system that's controlled by big tech overlords. Talk to me about the power of these tech giants. Has their influence moved kind of out of the shadows and just it's out in the open now?
As you said, there is absolutely nothing new about billionaires being able to buy politics in the United States. It's been happening since the time of Thomas Edison, Henry Ford. There's nothing new there. What is absolutely fantastically novel is this new form of capital that people like Jeff Bezos and Microsoft and Google and to some extent Elon Musk now possess. Because you see what lives inside our phones now, this algorithmic capital, which is hooked supposedly to the cloud. Of course, it's not a cloud, it's machines, it's servers, it's millions of kilometers of optic fiber cables. This is a new form of capital because what it does, it doesn't produce anything. So Amazon.com, for instance, produces nothing except a digital fiefdom in which producers and consumers are encased. And the owner, Jeff Bezos, has a capacity like a baron from yesteryear to charge a rent for companies to sell you while you have become a kind of cloud serf, since it is you and me who are producing a large part of the capital, of this cloud capital, that allows Amazon to function. Because every time you post a video or a review or provide your own data, you're building up like a cloud serf. You're not being paid for it. Actually, you pay with your money and with your free labor to construct this new form of capital, which, unlike the capital of Henry Ford, which was what? Machinery building the Model T. And Henry Ford was a monopolist of the Model T. He wanted to sell it to you, and he would buy some newspaper and some politician in order to ensure that the tramways would be ripped out of the asphalt, so that you would have to buy a Model T. But today, Bezos doesn't produce anything. He doesn't care who produces the stuff that you buy. All he cares is that you and all the producers are encased in this pseudo market. It's not a market. This platform, Amazon, and Amazon just one example.
But Yanis, how does that difference shape or inform the role of big tech, or just maybe money in tech and politics?
Well, you see, if you own cloud capital, you want people to be engaged with it, whether you are running Amazon.com or Uber or indeed Twitter or X as it's called today, or Instagram or TikTok. You really want people to be engaged with that. This is how you make them produce and reproduce your own cloud capital. And this is how you actually manage to target advertisements towards them and also sell to them directly, whether you do it through Facebook or Amazon or TikTok. Now, once you engage people like that, and the manner in which you do poisons democracy. Why? Because suddenly our conversation, everything we do online, which is now intertwined with this reproduction of cloud capital, totally alters the manner in which we're communicating ideas. And, you know, Elon Musk, Jeff Zuckerberg's Instagram and Facebook, they really don't care what we're talking about to one another. They care about our constant engagement with the machine, that this dialectical relationship between us and the machine is never ending. So the algorithm is simply primed to maximize their engagement. And this is human psychology. The best way of doing that is to keep us angry and to keep us in bubbles and to keep us hurling abuse at one another or hurling compliments at one another. And therefore, this is what the poisoning of the conversation, which is essential to democracy, amounts to.
Maria, as we talk about democracy and freedom, I want to turn to you. I mean, you're no stranger to the ways that authoritarian regimes can use social media to suppress freedom. And you've said that former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte was actually a far smaller dictator compared to Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. Very, very provocative idea there. That's a significant statement, especially coming from you. I mean, you were actually harassed and targeted and arrested by Duterte for exposing the abuses of his government. In light of your experience and that analysis, what threat do you think that tech giants pose, and what threat do their products and platforms pose to democracy?
So let me pick up from what Yanis had actually said. And, everything I tell you is backed by data. We lived through it. I was targeted, and then we took that data down and tracked it over time, exactly what the tech platforms do. But what it showed us was that, I became a journalist because information is power. And when big data happened, which is what Yanis is talking about, it changed everything. And that shift from, let's say, the Excel sheet to all these hundreds and thousands of different data points that a platform can now use, big tech has used to be able to insidiously manipulate us. And I say this with, let me pick up two things he said, right? The first is that the social media, the first time we entered, we kind of worked with artificial intelligence. Social media, and this is an MIT report from 2018, so it's significantly worse today. MIT said that lies spread 6 times faster on social media. And our data in the Philippines is in 2017, if you lace it with fear, anger, and hate, it spreads virally. It spreads even faster. If lies are facts, right? And this I've said over and over since 2016, which was when I got hit with 90 hate messages per hour, right? Something we've never felt before. But, at that point, what I realized was if you don't have facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without any of these three, we have no shared reality. We can't begin to actually have journalism. You can't have anything, let alone try to deal with these existential problems like climate change. A dictator wins in an environment like this. I watch this in the Philippines. And a simple thing like the algorithm of growth, all the American social media companies had used this before TikTok came in. This is a friends of friends algorithm, right? In the Philippines, when Rodrigo Duterte won in 2016, we weren't debating the facts, but we were one of the top Facebook countries in the world. And as he took power, if you were pro-Duterte, Friends of Friends algorithm moved you further right. If you're anti-Duterte, you move further left. And over time, this is how filter bubbles worked. And, several months later, Trump was elected. You can replace the name Duterte with every other digital authoritarian that has come to power.
Since you bring up Trump, Yanis, I'm going to bring up Elon Musk again because he was particularly close to Donald Trump. He funneled at least $119 million into Trump's campaign, and his net worth has increased by around $70 billion after Trump's victory, with Tesla's share price surging 15% the day after the election. Trump appointed Musk to co-head a new Department of Government Efficiency focused on restructuring federal agencies, which raises questions about conflicts of interest, considering Elon Musk holds billions of dollars in federal contracts for his businesses. So it seems a little bit like the fox overseeing the henhouse. But Musk has also been weighing in on Trump's cabinet picks. Do you have any concern that not just the nation's richest man, but the world's richest man is this close to the next US president?
I'm very concerned, but I think I was concerned by this ever since I was 12, 13 years old, because we in the West, we function and labor under the illusion that we live in democracies. We don't live in democracies. We live in oligarchies with occasional elections. Wasn't Rockefeller a very influential figure in almost every American administration ever? I live in a country where 5 families, effectively, maybe 10, own every chunk of the formerly publicly owned electricity grid, and the same families own the 5 television channels. So if you dare criticize the manner in which they are conducting their businesses, you simply disappear from television screens. So, Elon Musk is following a very long lineage of this coalescence between oligarchic power in the public sector and in the private sector. By the way, his slash and burn department of government efficiency, I would be very interested to see if it slashes and burns the NASA budget from which SpaceX gets all its contracts. Something within me tells me that that probably won't happen.
I suspect you might be right. Maria, what do you make of this? Do you see this as just an extension of a very long-standing tradition in the United States and other countries where oligarchic power kind of overdetermines the politics? Or do you see something unique or different in this case?
No, I think there are 2 reasons why this is significantly worse. One is the scale of the speed at which information, at which this kind of data can be pulled together that turns into power. And the second is the reach, right? This is global. This isn't just the United States. When Elon Musk decided that Ukraine could not bomb Russia through his satellite network, he wasn't elected. He wasn't a government official. This was something that the private sector didn't really do before, and now we're shifting into that. I think, you have to look at this in 2 ways. There's a great book by Marichka Schaake that just came out in September, shortly before elections. It's called The Tech Coup. Right? If you look at the tech, it is the tech that has catalyzed big tech in general. Technology is the least regulated industry globally. And we're talking about safety issues here, right? You asked, how is the vote affected? Well, technology essentially hacks our biology, changing the way we feel, that changes the way we see the world, that changes the way we act, i.e. the way we vote. Right? It's not a coincidence that as of this year, 71% of the world now is under authoritarian rule, and we are electing these authoritarians, electing these illiberal leaders by choice, right? You take a look. Anyway, let me not go there. The other part of this, of course, is that checks and balances of power. What we've seen, you've heard talk of Autocracy Inc., Kleptocracy Inc. I've come from a country that had Marcos, a people power revolt in 1986 for Marcos stealing $10 billion. And in 2022, we Filipinos elected overwhelmingly his only son and namesake, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., as our president. He's our president now. And, part of the reason that happened was because of information operations that literally changed our history in front of our eyes. So there's a difference. There's a difference in the way the cellular level of a democracy works. It spreads faster. And then there's what Yanis is talking about is at a far larger scale, power and money.
As we talk about Musk, it's not just that he's influencing U.S. Politics. He was on Trump's call to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He's been in regular contact with Putin in Russia. He has extensive business interests in China with Tesla. And as Yanis alluded to, he has a space connection because of SpaceX and its satellite internet service Starlink. What's the potential consequence of this for the global kind of geopolitical landscape?
This is no longer the world we knew. At the Nobel lecture in 2021, I said, we're stepping on the rubble of the world that was. You have a man he went to talk to Iran without consulting anyone else. It's, again, an age of dictators, right? How to stand up to a dictator. Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, these men hold far more power over parts of the world that they've never even heard of. And their whims. And it is whimsical in many ways, right? The way he bought Twitter, turned it to X, how it played a role in elections. These are all things that come together, and the checks and balances that used to be part of democratic societies, these get eroded. So it's going to be, I mean, the entire world is watching what happens after President-elect Trump takes office. And, you know, again, a lesson from the Philippines: our constitution is patterned after the United States, 3 branches of government. And when Rodrigo Duterte took office, he became the most powerful man. Our constitutions give a powerful president. And within 6 months of taking office in 2016, President Duterte crushed the institutions. He became all powerful.
Yanis, do you think that under Trump, the threat that big tech firms pose to consumers has a chance of being contained? The federal government under Trump and Biden, it sued Amazon, Apple, Meta, Google, all for antitrust violations, even proposing the breakup of Google's search engine monopoly. Now, Trump, of course, tapped Brendan Carr, a critic of big tech, to chair the Federal Communications Commission. For some, there's reason to have hope that a Trump White House could lead to more oversight of big tech, that there could be more accountability in that sphere. Others say no. What do you say?
There has never been any accountability of big tech, not under Biden, and there won't, of course, be under Trump. Lina Khan on the FTC tried valiantly various ways of proposing means by which to contain big tech, but none of that would come to bear.
But what about the antitrust suits? What about the proposal of breaking up Google? I mean, these feel like at least attempts to keep them in check, no?
Irrelevant. They were attempts, but they had no chance. They stood no chance because the antitrust legislation, we must understand, you know, it's the Sherman Act from, you know, back the days of Teddy Roosevelt. That was a very brave attempt to break up monopolies like Standard Oil. But, you know, technically that was really very simple to do. You had Standard Oil, which was all over the United States, and you broke it up on a state-by-state basis, and you allowed each of these new companies to compete across the United States. But how do you break up Google? The idea of breaking up Google, or Meta for that matter, or Facebook, unless you have a way of influencing the algorithm, because you see, the algorithm is ever so powerful. It doesn't matter, even if you take Elon Musk out of the equation. Imagine Elon Musk is jettisoned by Donald Trump. You know, they may have a falling out tomorrow. It won't make any difference because, you know, this cloud capital, I'll call it cloud capital, it's not just the algorithm, it's the whole paraphernalia of cloud capital. You know what it does? We have a dialectical relationship with it. We are training it through our behavior online, through Alexa, through Siri. We're training it to train us, to know us well, so that it can give us good advice. You know, I don't know whether you've ever used Spotify, but the music Spotify proposes to me, I usually like very much, anything between very much and brilliantly, right? And then it grabs your attention, and then the next time it suggests something, you have developed a bond of trust with it, rightly or wrongly. And that is an immense power. You see, this is a new form of capital, which is not producing other things like machines producing machines. It is producing a capacity to modify our behavior. This is what really matters. Because, you know, Elon Musk's relationship with Donald Trump, as I said, is a transient thing. It's here today, gone tomorrow. If you think in terms of, you know, the exorbitant power of billionaires, think of the way in which, the Wall Street bankers took over the Obama administration and completely usurped the whole point of the Obama administration. So that is not so much a problem. The problem is when you have an automated form of capital equipment, which interacts with public opinion and our private soul and our inner desires and manufactures our desires, because this is what Amazon's Alexa does. You train it to train you, to train it to suggest something to you that you want to buy, and then it sells it to you directly, bypassing all markets. That is not even capitalism anymore.
Maria, I see you nodding vigorously, and I also saw you sort of expressed agreement with the idea that the regulation that we've seen so far, if you want to call it that, was minimal at best. Why do you see it that way?
The designs of the platforms were never touched, right? And we haven't mentioned surveillance capitalism, which is the business model didn't even have a name until Shoshana Zuboff published this 750-page book in 2019. Look how late that was, right? And that is actually, you asked about this earlier, and this is for older folks, the way I think about the world today, the way we plug into these tech platforms. Think the Matrix. Remember, the Matrix takes all of our energy. We're pumping our energy, talk data into the Matrix, and then we're each kind of doing our own Truman Show. We're being fed, except no one is watching you, except you in your bubble, right? This is personalization. This is part of what the data can do. But I think the other part is, I'll remind you, in 2022, in April 2022, 300 Nobel laureates, along with civil society groups, largely in the EU, signed what we call the 10-point action plan. And this didn't really amount to that much. It had just 3 buckets. The first is you have to stop surveillance for profit. None of us ever signed up. Data privacy is a myth nowadays. None of us signed up to be cloned by any of these platforms, but that's what's happened. And that's how we train them, they train us, right? Chicken or the egg in terms of behavior. The second is the coded bias. Especially for me, I live in the global South, right? If you're a woman, LGBTQ+, if you're a brown or Black or marginalized in the real world, you're further marginalized online by this code. And then finally, the last one, will journalism survive this time period? Journalism is the antidote to tyranny, but we have no distribution. People talk about news avoidance. Are they avoiding the news, or is the news not being distributed to them on the platform?
Yanis, in your book, you write, paid labor performs only a fraction of the work that big tech relies on. Most of the work is performed by billions of people for free. As Maria is talking about structures and systems, and you have, of course, as well, I can't help but ask, how are people participating in their own exploitation? How is the current system structured in a way where people are undermining their own possibilities at economic prosperity? And what is the solution to this if, as you call it, the cloud's reach is unavoidable?
Well, the worst kind of slavery is the one that we volunteer to. Let's not forget that. The process is really very simple. I mean, look, I'm the last one to condemn people for using social media because I use it all the time. I tweet, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Instagram, I'm everywhere. This is the only way of communicating your point. So this is not a moralistic take, but it's an objective take. What I'm saying is this: every time you upload something that appeals to someone on a platform, you are strengthening the capacity of the platform to keep the eyeballs of that somebody on the platform. So you're adding to the cloud capital of that platform. And to move beyond the concept of ideas and feelings, and to turn, as an economist, allow me to do this just for a second, to hardcore financial stuff. Most conglomerates dispense around 85% of their revenues in the form of wages and salaries. If you look at General Electric, General Motors, if you look at Volkswagen, this is more or less maybe anything between 80, 90%, right? Facebook, 1%. 1% of its revenues goes to salaries and wages. Now, how can that be? Well, because it is all of us who are producing the capital of Facebook. That has never happened before in human history. When an industrialist, a textile manufacturer, wanted a new machine in order to improve productivity, they would have to order the machine to some other capitalist who would then have to employ wage labor to produce it, right? Today, we are all producing the cloud capital of Zuckerberg, of Bezos, of Google. Now, and again, this is not a moralistic point of view, but you will allow me to say, as an old-fashioned Marxist, that in the end, Karl Marx was right. The only way that you can regulate, that you can socialize these machines and not allow them to turn you, as Maria said, in the victims of the matrix, is if we have social ownership of those machines. Regulation will not cut it, because let's face it, there is no one who understands how these algorithms work unless they own them. It is impossible for a federal body or a state body to interfere with the actual code of the system unless you have property rights over them and the capacity to get into the IP. But that means a socialist form or a social form or a democratic form, a democratization of capital. Now, that's a big order, I know, but it is far more utopic to believe that you can civilize this new world in which cloud capital is owned by the 0.001%. So you have to choose your utopias. Do you want to choose the utopia of thinking that you can actually moderate it if Kamala Harris had won, thinks it would have been better? That is a worse utopia than to think that you can socialize cloud capital.
So, Maria, help me think toward one of these utopias, or maybe a different one. Your work focusing on safeguarding freedom of expression won you the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021. And your book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator, traces your journey in doing just that. So help me think about ways that everyday citizens can actually stand up to big tech, that they can resist the power and control of these huge structures that seem insurmountable. How do we find a way as everyday people to hold them accountable?
It's impossible alone, right? So I'll differ with Yanis in one thing. I do think legislation can play a role in this, because if you hold them accountable, i.e. criminally liable, right? What we are seeing from big tech is the kind of impunity that we are seeing from dictators to be all around the world, whether you look at Putin or whether you look at what Israel is doing now, right? So take a look. I mean, Netanyahu, let me be specific in that. What you're seeing is a corruption of everything and a kleptocracy that's been allowed. So if you hold them accountable, then that can change. A simple one, which may or may not happen because Project 2025 is saying they want to get rid of Section 230 for a whole host of other reasons. But if you hold the platform accountable, they will move quickly to stop the lies from spreading, to stop the incentive structure. I think that's one. The second one is that we're here at the World Movement for Democracy in Johannesburg, right? There's 600 civil rights and human rights activists who are here trying to protect democracies. We move into the physical world. One of the ways that we were able to survive 6 years of attacks, of government attacks in the Philippines, was we moved into the real world. We moved outside of this kind of manipulative, insidious manipulation that as you heard from Yanis, it's not just algorithms, it's literally micro-targeting, literally clones you and takes your weakest moment to a message and sells it. And it's not as if it's a personal thing. They just want to make more money at it. So surveillance for profit is the main goal. So the last one is, how do you stop impunity, right? It's impunity to steal our content, for example. And yet, what we're seeing now is the enshittification of the internet. And that's a Cory Doctorow word, right? As of January this year, 57.1% of the internet today is low quality content. Why? Once you introduce generative AI, you rolled it out publicly. It's like rolling out the vaccine without ever testing it. Tech companies have gotten away with impunity, and that must stop.
If I may come in to agree, Maria, for a second, you're right. I mean, legislation is still crucial, but it has to be radical. It can't just be a refurbishment of the Sherman Act. I agree with with everything you said, and I would go further. So, for instance, imagine if we legislated interoperability. So, I can't escape X easily because I've got more than 1 million followers, whereas in Blue Sky I've got 5,000, right? But imagine if you forced X by law to make sure that, when I post something on Blue Sky, my followers on X receive it as well. Now, that would really seriously, substantially reduce the exorbitant power of Elon Musk over X. This is just one example. But there are many such radical moves you can take. But of course, we don't have time to discuss more of them now.
Maria, did you want to squeeze something in? Go ahead.
You know, we've given up on big tech in Rappler, and a year ago we rolled out deliberative technology. Yanis, you should try it. It's a matrix protocol chat app because we in the Philippines have elections in 2025, and I want a place where real people can have real conversations so that we can actually build a society instead of tear it down. It's working so far.
Well, we'll have to keep watching. Yanis Varoufakis, Maria Ressa, thank you both so much for joining me on UpFront. That is our show. UpFront, we'll be back next week.